Hola, First Gen. You're listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your host, and I am going to let today's guest introduce herself. Mujer, let us into your world.
Hi, my name is Emily Tapia. I am a second generation Latina from LA. Although I'm second generation, I do feel that I have so many relatable upbringing and like lifestyle and traditions that I feel like a lot of first gen people have gone through. I've talked about it with people who are first gen with my friends, and it's like I feel like first gen sometimes has to do with like the first person in your family to have this awakening or to have this realization that like trauma needs to end and this cycle of trauma and like customs that we have been brought into. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's what first gen means to me at least.
Yeah, I kind of like that distinction or that connection. I think that a lot of things, if one generation doesn't stop them, they will carry through, right, from one generation to the next. So I completely agree. And so, where did you say you grew up?
I grew up in South Central LA. So,
Okay.
yeah, my whole life I lived in LA. I went to school in Long Beach. I've moved a lot, but for the most part, like I'm from LA, born and raised. My parents as well were born and raised in LA.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your parents. So they were then born to Mexican parents, it sounds
Yeah,
like,
Mexican parents from my
that
mom and my
immigrated.
dad. Yeah. So my
Okay.
dad's family, so he's the youngest out of his five siblings or four siblings. They were all born in Mexico. My grandma was pregnant of him when she came here.
Mm,
My grandpa had already been here, like most families, usually the dad comes first, makes money, tries to establish something, then the mom comes. And that's what happened with my dad's family. So my grandma was pregnant of him. So he grew up very like Mexican traditions. He grew up um like more Mexican than American for sure. And same thing
mm-hmm.
with my mom's family. My grandma, she came here pretty young. She only had two kids at the time when she came, and then she had 10 more when she was here. So my
Wow.
mom is somewhere in the middle of those 12 kids.
Yeah.
So my mom was also first generation. So my parents grew up very poor, you can say. Very Mexican, like where it's like the whole family contributes, the whole family kind of helps around. But yeah, so when I grew up, my mom had me at 16. So
Mm,
growing up, I felt like I was growing with my mom. And I feel like she didn't have time to really get to know herself, get to know that she was living through a cycle of trauma. My grandparents both were my grandpas, I guess. I never really knew them. So I guess my grandpas were both very toxic men. And I don't think they really realized it. I'll give you an example. Like my dad, I feel like had a dad who was very in and out of their life, and he
mm.
didn't really know his dad. And then when he was like maybe 7 or 8, my grandpa just kind of left. Had more kids all over. In LA, in Mexico, back in LA, back in Mexico, he had kids. And my
Wow.
dad didn't really reconnect with him until he was older. And then on my mom's side, my grandpa was there, but he was an alcoholic. He did drugs. He was abusive to my grandma. So on my mom's side, it was kind of like with so many siblings, especially at home, I feel like their mentality was like, hurry up and get out of here. So a lot of the
Mm,
women in my family, I feel like their escape was having a baby with a man that's going to protect them and save them from this
mm-hmm.
lifestyle. And I think that's like a continuing cycle that I've seen. And luckily, I recognized it. Luckily, I recognized it from really young, like seeing that my mom was not the most mature. She did a lot of, she made a lot of mistakes. As I've gotten older, I've learned to accept her and forgive her and not blame her, but
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, like it's really hard to understand like why do I feel like unwanted, why do I feel unwanted? It's like, of course, I'm with parents who had me as kids, you know,
Mm,
and then
yeah.
they were barely raised themselves. They were taken care of, they weren't raised. And I feel
Yeah.
like most of us, or at least in my experience, I've seen people are being taken care of, they're not being raised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that came up as you were speaking is both of your parents were children of large families.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's like played up, or like, oh, big families are fun and whatever. Like, at least that's what I think. I grew up thinking like, oh,
Yeah.
big families are nice. But I think in just looking at, for example, your experience, and also I've been reflecting on my parents, they're both one of six.
Mm.
And I think it only makes sense that, who knows, maybe there are big families who get quality love and attention and all of that, but for me it only made sense that the way that they receive love and like the amount of time and attention that they got was very minimal,
Mhm.
compared to maybe a family of two or three where the children could be the focus if the parents choose to.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, I think, maybe that reflected in your family too, right? Like your
Yeah.
parents weren't necessarily, like you said, as long as they were maybe alive, the parents were doing a good job, but
They're
there was
alive and
not.
treating you like that's them being a parent. Mhm.
Yeah, those are like the standards to be met. I know that there's a lot of people out there that respect that so much. And I think we do too. We know that even just keeping a child fed and alive is a lot of work, right?
Right. No,
And
yeah, of course. Mhm.
especially I think like for them who immigrated here and who didn't have it easy in their own way as well. But I think that's also like a hard balance that comes with those who become aware of healing, right? So you mentioned like I feel a little bit more awoken, or I'm like coming into the knowledge of healing, of trauma, of what that actually looks like and how it plays out. But it's like a weird dance or balance that we have to do of like appreciating what was done and having empathy for it, but
Yeah.
also recognizing like there is healing that needs to get done from it.
Yeah, and I think that's a big dilemma that I struggle with being a teenager and just being a kid. I think I just really kind of realized it in my 20s after leaving like a toxic relationship. Like a lot of things that were not normal, just you become like you become normalized to it, or you start thinking that yeah, and it starts making you feel guilty almost like when you want more or expect more, and it's just like it makes you feel guilty for like almost judging my like your parents or your grandparents. And I try to check myself, like I'm not trying to judge or belittle or take credit for what you did do, but I can see a lot of things that you did wrong as well. Like the way I guess I would want to raise my kids, or the way, I would want to just work on myself, like I see that sometimes my grandma or my mom, I see that they don't even take the time. And then again, it's not to discourage them or to discredit the women that they are. Mexican women are always considered strong women when they take care of everybody, and I think that's such a
Mm,
big stigma that's like if you take care of everybody and put yourself last, like you're a good woman. Like you cook for everybody, you eat last, you're a good woman. And I
yeah.
think growing up, like I was confused on that, and it made me feel like, okay, yeah, that's what being a good woman is. Like you cook for the whole house, you look stressed and you look miserable, but like, hey, you're a good woman because you took care of your kids, you took care of everybody, you made sure everybody ate, you made sure the house is clean. And if you pamper yourself for a day, oh God forbid, like you put yourself last or you put yourself first, like you're selfish. So I
Yeah.
think like trying to unlearn that's not the best way to be
Mm,
a woman or a parent. I feel like taking care of yourself first should be like a priority. Like, yeah, I'm not saying like eat a full course meal and let your kids eat freaking bread, but what I'm saying is like it's okay to take care of yourself, to prioritize yourself, because when you're happy, you give more love. You're able to take care of people more when you're more happy. So I think like even in that aspect, like I'm trying to unlearn like little things about my upbringing, and yeah, like the whole
yeah.
awakening thing. Like I do feel like it progressively happened, but it didn't happen like from one day to another. But from one
Yeah.
day to another, I did realize like, wow, like I'm not the only one who feels this way, and luckily I've surrounded myself with women and just people in general who have like that same type of mindset where it's like, I love my mom, I love my grandma, I love my parents, but like, no, like I want to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you've touched on a couple of points that I want to go back to. One of them is the putting others before you makes you a good woman. And at the same time, it doesn't afford you loyalty from your husband, which I
Yeah.
think is crazy, right? So you mentioned like your grandpa, unfortunate or whatever, that's his life, but like he
Yeah.
had kids everywhere. And so even though there was this self sacrificing aspect, what they were getting in return, in my opinion,
Mhm.
did not justify what they were doing, like
Yeah.
to put everyone else before you and then not receive the same respect or sacrifice, I think is, at the root of some of the things that stem, like issues that stem from that, right?
Exactly.
And to be honest, like, I'm a coach for first gens, and that comes up with every single one of my clients. They
Mhm.
have such a hard time prioritizing themselves
Mhm.
and doing things for themselves, like habits. When it comes to anyone else, they'll be on top of it. But when it comes to themselves, it's hard to prioritize.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how that has showed up maybe for you. It seems like you were becoming aware, like something isn't right, things could or should be better. How
Yeah.
did they start to show up for you? Like, what were those realization moments like for you?
I'll give you an example. Like even just the fact that like sometimes, they say like respect me. Like I don't care if like you're not feeling
Mm,
respected, like respect me no matter what. Like I'm your parent. And it's like, well, why? Like because I said so. And it was always that like frustration where it's like you are disrespecting me. Like maybe it's a brat move, but it's just like I'm not gonna respect you just because you're demanding respect. Like,
mhm,
no, like, maybe it was a brat move at first, but as I gotten older, it's like no, like now I'm an adult and I still think my parents demand that type of respect where it's like, no, I'm your parent, like you're gonna respect me. And in a way, yes, but I think even as a kid, I would recognize like this is not okay. As a teenager, I would recognize it too, but still like naturally I gravitated towards like men who kind of had those same qualities. To be honest, I didn't really realize like more until I left a relationship that I was in. I always knew I wanted like more out of life. Like I didn't want to just have a 9 to 5. I didn't want to just have an office job. I didn't want to just come home and cook for my kids and take care of my husband. Like that's nice, but like I've always wanted like more. I wanted to
mhm,
be able to travel whenever I wanted. I wanted, yeah, I can have kids and take them with me. But I think like just for example, I was saying with my dad, it was like something that I would almost feel belittled if I didn't know how to cook something or if I didn't know, like, my dad was always like, oh, or at a family party, go serve me a plate. It was always kind of like, oh, this is things that I have to do. And I remember being younger and thinking like, like, I'll serve your food because I want to, not because it's like I need to.
yeah.
But then as I was in this relationship, I kind of started thinking like these are just qualities men want. This is a type of
Mm,
qualities a man wants in a woman. So let me be that. So in a lot of instances, I was being that type of woman where I would prioritize him over me, his wants over mine. And back to like my parents' situation where I was saying, like, I remember my dad being in a relationship where he took care of everything. And, my stepmom, she, she took care of him. She washed his clothes, she bought the groceries, and he took care of everything else. When I was a baby, he wasn't stable, and my stepmom, like financially stable. So my stepmom kind of helped him to get his stuff together, and then as he got his stuff together, he kind of helped her to help with her career, if that makes sense. So
mhm,
like subconsciously, I thought that that was kind of normal or okay. So when I
mm,
was in a relationship, the guy I was with was going to school, and I always thought like, okay, I'm going to help him as much as I can because when he's done with school, like, then it'll be my turn to focus on my business or my thing or whatever it is that I want to do. So I think subconsciously I thought that.
mhm,
So I did. Like I helped him with a lot. I financially helped him, physically helped him, emotionally helped him, but I didn't get anything in return. Like you said, like it's always like you think that doing all these things is going to make you a better woman or the woman that they want. And
mhm,
sometimes it makes them take you for granted even more, doing the most.
mm,
So I
mhm,
think when I finally left that relationship, that's when I really realized like I was settling. I was settling in my relationship. I was settling in my lifestyle because of the lifestyles that I seen around me. I would look at what was around me and it made me feel like, well, maybe I'm wanting too much. Maybe I'm expecting too much out of life. And then of course being with people who discourage you from reaching bigger dreams or discourage you from wanting more. It makes you
Yeah.
feel like, okay, you have to settle. I think I've always recognized little signs, like it was never like a day or like a specific thing that kind of helped me realize something. I think it was like little signs throughout my life that eventually, when I got older, I looked back at everything, was like, no, this is what I've always felt, and I need to do the work to unlearn so much that I've
Mm.
been so accustomed to thinking was normal. So I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in the process of obviously like unlearning things and um reteaching myself, but yeah, it's a process. And I think that's why so many of our generation don't have kids because it's like, like
Yeah.
you start feeling that you need to be perfect almost before you have kids because at least for me, I felt like my parents had so many things to work on before they had me that I got to see them go through so many different stages in their life and they never got to settle mentally like okay this is who I like accepting themselves and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like like I'm barely kind of learning who I am.
Yeah. Sounds like you had examples of machismo in a way, right? Being reflected to you on your mother's end or mother's side and on your father's side.
Yeah.
So, for example, on your father's side, like you mentioned, he expected that you serve him a plate at a party. How did you see your mom do that? Would she do the same when she was with someone? Like she kind of served them and did things for them like that?
Yes and no. My mom, again, she was really young when she had me, so I've seen different stages of her. Like I've seen her in different stages with men as well. Like in the beginning, I think it was very much like if like for example, if she's with a guy that says, "Go serve me my plate," I don't think she would be like she'll be more like, "Who the hell are you talking to?" That's how my mom is. But I feel like I did see it in my family and my mom's side. So like my aunts on my mom's side.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you think that seeing that kind of like rebel in her helped you when you were seeing the machista on like the machista tendencies, let's say on your dad's side? Do you think that was the comparison that helped you say, this isn't right, like something's not
Yeah.
sitting right with me? Or do you think it was just like innate in you that you just knew something felt weird?
I think both, because I mean, there's a reason why my mom and my dad didn't last together. So, I mean, I do think my dad was more of the machisto type, and my mom was more the type to not take that. And
Mm,
so I think obviously they didn't last. And I think growing up, I respected that a lot about my mom, that she didn't take anything from anybody. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
she had other qualities that were not great about her, but as far as like being like told, something like that, or like my mom stood her ground. So I think seeing that definitely resonated with me a lot. I think I took qualities from different people in my life and plugged them into like myself. So I saw good
mm-hmm,
qualities in my dad. I saw good qualities in my stepmom, good qualities in my mom. All three of them had bad qualities, but I learned how to distinguish them and use their good qualities into how I wanted to be or who I was
mm-hmm,
and who I wanted to become. And I
mm-hmm.
think I recognized what I liked even as a kid, I would look back like, oh, I liked the way that made me feel like when they told me that, or, so I would take parts of, yeah, people around me
Mm-hmm.
and try to focus on letting that transpire out of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like reflect whatever you liked back. I love that. And I'm wondering if through this kind of path you had like who was maybe your go-to or the guidance or someone who you could talk about these things like I don't like how this is happening or that like was there someone that you an adult that you can go to or were you kind of like internalizing these things and taking note as you grew up?
I definitely internalized them. I had no adult to talk to about it at all. But that's when I got into poetry. So I
Mm.
think writing, journaling really helped me a lot. It felt like I was talking to somebody, like I still have a lot of old poems and old journals that I wrote of things like of how I felt. That helped me a lot through my upbringing, like in general. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
started writing poetry when I was like in fifth, sixth grade. So I think that
Mm.
that definitely helped me. But I never really had an adult to talk to. And also because I
Yeah.
knew a lot of things my parents were doing were wrong. And I didn't want to like, I don't know, tell somebody and then because I knew I still loved them. So I didn't want anybody to judge them or I don't know, possibly try to like take me away from them or something. I don't know. Like I remember always
Mm.
thinking that, like I don't want them thinking like this, so I wouldn't tell anybody anything.
And I'll say, I believe you're eldest of four,
Five.
five. Wow. Okay. So eldest of five. And so I'll say, in working with first gens, or just the Latinx community, I've asked this question intentfully because it's been so interesting to learn that a lot of fellow Latinas did not have adults that they could go to. It was kind of like they were figuring things out on their own as they went, and there wasn't a lot of other adults, let's say present, or mentors or that kind of stuff that they could lean on. So another thing that I think you touched on was because your family is big, or each side has a lot of family. And similar to me, I think you got to witness a lot of lives play out, as did I feel. I feel like my aunts and uncles had, unfortunately, like kids from different marriages, a lot of them, right? And so I had a lot of cousins, and I got to see them get married. And then, I feel like I always say in my family, there's everything you can imagine that can happen. There's like examples of abuse, different types of trauma, of, like anything that you can imagine. I feel like there's an example of it in my family. And I'm wondering if you saw the same, like as you were growing up, you saw different lifestyles play out and you were kind of like, nope, don't want that for me. No, because I definitely resonate with that.
That's true. Yeah. And it's funny how as a kid you don't really recognize that like the way you're describing it. I didn't recognize that as a kid, but I remember thinking like, oh, I do not want to be with that type of guy. I remember thinking that like because despite me being in a toxic relationship at the moment, like obviously I didn't know it was toxic, but I also knew that I didn't want to be with somebody who expected me like not to work, for example.
Mm,
And I think like I saw that in my family too, where it's like I have aunts that don't work and their husbands don't want them to work. And then so I would see that and it's like, don't want that.
let's talk about that a little bit because you've mentioned this toxic relationship, a couple of times.
I know.
Um, but it is important to note that even though growing up, let's say you can become aware of different things you don't want in your life, it is still very possible that you repeat it in your life. And I see this with my clients too, like coaching clients. They think like, well, but that couldn't possibly be, like, I'm not replicating. And in some way it feels like I am, but why? It's very possible, to be aware, but still attract the same thing because for some reason, even if it's painful, it's comfortable, like similarity can be comfortable. We know how to swim in these waters, so we're going to attract similar environments, right? Where we feel like maybe not the best, but we know how to manage them. So
Yeah.
how did that start to show up in your relationship, or when was it like a light bulb went off and you were like, ooh, maybe I'm doing the things I thought I never would?
Yeah. Well, just for like backstory really quick, like I feel like my mom, um, how you said, like I think she tried not to follow certain traumas that she grew up seeing. Like she grew up with an abusive dad and she grew up with, seeing her mom be abusive. And my mom, I feel like has been in like mentally abusive relationships. And I think
Mm,
because she's never really got physically abused, she doesn't feel that she's repeating a cycle that she has been. And I
mm,
think, but then me seeing it, it was always kind of like, well, I know I don't want that. I know I don't want someone belittling me. Like I want to feel supported and in my relationship. And I think when I was with someone, with this guy I'm mentioning, I think I didn't realize that he was making me believe he was a narcissist. So I think he was making me believe what he wanted me to believe about him. So it was kind of like, I want you to get this image of me. And I think I convinced myself that the image he was trying to show me was who he really was. And I
mm,
think because like I would see in my experience I would see cheating like in my family and I would see like those type of things, so I always felt like cheating was like the ultimate like bad thing that can happen. So although I knew he was like not supportive in certain things, although I knew he was like he made me feel bad about my body sometimes. I know he made me he discouraged me from just doing little things. Like I wanted to be more out there like on social media, and even when I started my business, like just little things like that. I always
mm,
felt like, yeah, I saw little signs of like the manipulation. I saw signs of like mental abuse, but he never cheated on me. So it was like, at least he didn't cheat on me. You know, it could be
Mm,
worse. So I think
mm,
because I would see that break up a lot of families, and at least in my families, I would think like that's the ultimate like thing. So then
mm.
when I realized he had been cheating on me, and he was cheating on me for a long time on and off throughout the whole relationship, it almost made me feel like, okay, like I already knew he was not a great person. And
Yeah.
then this is just like a stamp, like, okay, now this is like, what else can you do? And I was gonna accept him back because again, I would see this in my family where it was like they're gonna change and they promise all these things, or like marriage is a promise all of a sudden, and those fixed
Mm.
things, you know, and I've seen that in my family too, where it's like marriage is supposed to fix like the problems, or a
Oh.
kid is going to fix the problems. He did say, well, I was going to marry you, I was going to do this. To me, if that was my goal, being a wife and a mom, then I would have stayed with him. Like, okay, well, he's promising me these things that I've always wanted, let me stay with him. My dad, although he's a good-hearted person, because of his traumas, I've also got the bad end of his traumas. Like I think I've been the main one to experience it the most subconsciously, because I knew my dad was a good person, but he did a lot of bad things. I kind of reflected that on my ex that I was with, because it was kind of like, well, yeah, you do a lot of bad things, but you still can be a good person, you know? So I think
Mm.
I didn't realize how I was kind of reliving the same feeling that I had with my dad with him.
Mm-hmm. Maybe intuitively sensing the red flags, but because they're not mirrored, like you said, exactly as you saw it in other relationships, like, oh, well, it's not being played out the same way, so it's not the same thing,
Hmm.
right? But intuitively feeling like, that was weird, that was
Yeah.
off. So I want to tell a little bit of a story too that I feel like I made that same connection, which was mind blowing to me, where I was seeing some red flags. The red flags mirrored the dynamic that I had with my mother, but because it was a man, I didn't even make the connection, right? Until years later into my healing, which was when this guy and I would fight, he would want to leave. Like, and so there was this constant of me chasing. And at some point, I became the one that would leave, but there was no chasing back. Okay. And when I was going through my healing, I realized in the arguments that I would have with my mom, she would leave, right? Like she would like slam the door, go out, or just like she's done. If I say something she's not okay with, she's out the door. And I would always wish as a child, like, I wish my mom would come back and say sorry and stay and like feel bad for what just happened and apologize. But instead, I had to take the silent treatment and accept that and feel shitty. And, I had no power or communication skills to be like, this feels really wrong and sad. And so in the relationship, the same thing would happen. It's like he would run away, or like leave. And it was just like something in me was super sad, and then I would do it back to see if he would like be sad, and it wasn't happening, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Mhm.
Now looking back, I'm like, it was a copy paste of the dynamic that I had with my mom. So can you maybe tell us a little bit again, like how that same thing happened to you with your dad, and then the relationship you were in?
Yeah, and I can actually say the same exact thing happened with my mom too. So I forgot to mention that as well. Like also, that's exactly how he would be. Was he a Gemini? He
He
was a
was a Gemini.
fucking Gemini. But yeah, the exact same thing would happen. Now that I'm remembering, I
Hmm.
remember making that connection as well about even when I was in the relationship, I made that connection actually. Because
Mm.
I remember being a kid and my mom always ignoring me. Like if it was something that I had to say back, or if it was something like I wanted clarification of or something, it was just always like, I don't want to hear it. Literally walk out the room or slam the door in my face or take me outside, or literally like anything you could think of how she would ignore me. So I think I learned as I got older, one of my biggest triggers was being ignored,
Mm.
and even overthinking, like, oh, are they ignoring me because they're mad? Or are they ignoring me because, are they even ignoring me? Like if they would take too long to reply to me, it was always like a trigger for me, because it
Yeah.
was always remembering, or not even realizing at that moment that it was remembering my childhood. But as I got a little older in the relationship, this was already like year 5 or 6 that we were together. I made that distinction and I told him, you know what? I think I realized that like I get so mad at you leaving all the time or blocking me or ignoring me, like not answering my phone calls. This is not a healthy way to handle conflicts. And it was always
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I just need my space. Like you're trying to force me into a conversation I don't want to have. So then I was like, okay, fine, I'll give you your space to talk about it tomorrow. But then tomorrow would come and it was always like, well, it already passed. Why are you trying to talk about it now? So then I
Mm.
started feeling like maybe I am doing something wrong, you know? But then it's true. Like I started the same feeling as a kid where I was getting ignored as my mom. Now I'm doing this in the relationship. And luckily I was starting to get more like into my like awakening, I guess you can say, of realizing like, no, like I'm not wrong. Like you're in the wrong. And this is how I eventually caught him cheating and all that stuff because I started getting more into it. Like, no, this is not my imagination. Like you're ignoring me and this is you're wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so back to my dad, I do think my dad could be the nicest guy. Like nicest guy. Everybody loves him. Like he's the favorite uncle, he's the favorite brother, he's the favorite friend, favorite coworker. Everybody loves my dad. Another Gemini. Everybody loves my
You know
dad.
what's funny? My dad is a Gemini too.
Oh, really? Oh my God. So yeah,
Yeah.
everybody loves my dad. And so yes, he's a good person. Like he's a type to be like, oh, don't worry, I got it, you know? He's very much
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when he gets ugly, it's
Mm-hmm.
very ugly. And it's
Yeah.
very like even towards me. And for me, growing up, it was always kind of like subconsciously, I didn't realize that he was teaching me that although I hit you and although I hurt you, I still love you.
Mm.
And I think I learned that in
And you
the
need to respect me.
yeah, and then top it off, you talk back to me and you're disrespecting me. To me, it was always kind of like, okay, well, that's my dad, so he still loves me, you know. And I think in this relationship, he was the same exact way where everybody loved him. Nobody had ever saw the ugly side of him. So I would be crazy if I exposed that because it's like no one's gonna believe me. He's not ugly to anybody else, you
Yeah.
know. So to me, it was like, well, let people think that he's this great guy because he was on the surface, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but no one really knew him. And to this day, I don't think no one really knows him.
Yeah.
So I think I was in a relationship again, mirroring who my dad was to me. And then as I got older, like now I'm in a relationship and I think before I was more like I need my dad's approval for whatever reason. Now it's just kind of like, why? And it's funny how like my dad got along with this person. But the minute I told him what he did to me, it was like, oh, fuck him, you know, it's like and it's just kind of like you guys are very similar to each other. And to me it was
Mm.
kind of like you know, when it's like I saw a lot of things as a kid that a kid shouldn't see, you know, when it comes to his relationships, when it comes to um infidelity. Like I saw a lot of things as a kid on my mom's family, my dad's family, or in general, I've seen a lot of things. And I don't even think my parents really know like a lot of things that I've seen. And it's like I don't blame them. A lot of times they were busy working and trying to provide and you know, but I do think a lot of parents look at that as like, well, you know, I didn't like for example, my dad, it's like he didn't have his dad growing up. So to him it's like
Mm.
I'm there, so be grateful that I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, and it's like that's the bare minimum you do as a parent is be there. You know,
Mm.
because he didn't have his dad, it's like well, I'm there, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that you're saying in, and that we've touched on a little bit is like not wanting to repeat the cycles, and also how the point of reference for an adult, let's say your dad, is his dad. That's the point of
Yeah.
reference. And so if I'm doing better than my point of reference, then I'm doing better, right? So I want to discuss something with you that it's just been like top of mind, but I haven't like maybe talked about it, which is I have actually been really careful about not calling myself a cycle breaker.
Yeah.
And the reason is that I fear that, I see that like now that I am years into my healing and I've gotten past the resistance fighting point with my mom, and now I'm having more like I'm having deeper conversations with her where I'm learning more about her past and why she did certain things. To be honest, from her point of view, I see why she thinks or why she did better than she got, right? And I see how in her mind she was trying to avoid the things that she lived. And I fear doing the same, like 20 years from now, talking to my child and realizing, holy crap, in the pursuit of not repeating these cycles, I ended up doing this,
Yeah.
and now you're having to heal from that. So I'm just wondering, like, if you've thought about that, because I know a lot of people right now, that's the thing to say, like, I'm a cycle breaker, generational trauma stops with me.
Yeah.
But I take it with a lot of humbleness because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to live. We could live a war, and then live through poverty and then like start from, zero in certain aspects. So I'm wondering, yeah, like on your end, have you thought about that and what comes to mind?
I think for me, um, what I've learned the most out of what I missed from my childhood is just communicating with my kids. I
Mm,
didn't get that as a kid. So I think instead of having that conversation 20 years from now, you take the time to actually get to know your kids as they're growing up and actually talk to them and actually ask them, like, do you think I can do something better as a parent? Even just with my brothers. And I feel like I'm getting the practice that I probably need or something. But with my brothers, I ask them questions all the time, like, are you happy or do you like this? Or, I get to know them and I want to get to know them. Aside from being my brother, I want to know who they are to their friends, who they are to their teacher. I want to get to know them. And I think I'm not going to say there's no trauma I would ever give my kids, but there's not something so severe I can pass down to them if I do something as simple as talk to them. And I feel like
mm,
that's something um, that that can change so much in any relationship, whether it's your friend, your mom, your boyfriend, your siblings, your kids. I feel like just communication can change a lot. It's like, yeah, you might hate me. I'm not saying my kids are never gonna hate me. Obviously, there's gonna be times where they hate me. Like, okay, when you're done hating me, let's talk, whatever. And I think, yeah, I do get worried about that a little bit, but not so much, I guess, because I feel that yeah, I just feel like I'm gonna talk to my kids a lot more than I've ever received any conversation.
yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting because I think in the conversations that I have had, that's the conclusion that we come to too, is like opening the line of communication will make all the difference, And maybe like coming off the cloud of because I'm the parent, I'm right all the time, no questions asked, like even just removing that assumption, I think will hopefully be super helpful for the relationships that we can have with future
Yeah,
children.
yeah, exactly.
So, with that being said, and transitioning out a little bit from, the relationship that you were in for quite some time, how was it when you exited that relationship? And what were maybe the most powerful mind shifts that had to happen for you to be able to be like, okay, now I get to focus on what's next, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah. I think like how you were mentioning how you wanted to do like you do the chasing and then when it was time that they did something wrong and it's like no now I'm leaving. Now you chase me and then you
Mm,
didn't get that chase. I think something similar happened at the end of this relationship. Um well, just to break things down, I've never really opened up about anything that's actually happened in that relationship, at least not publicly. But towards the end I was feeling different. Women's intuition is always real. And I felt something. And again, I think I was focusing more on myself, like just overall, like things that I wanted, like things that were not right in my life. I was just focusing more on myself.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I guess because I was more like in tune, I guess, with myself, like I was starting to recognize something was off. Long story short, I found out he was cheating on me. I confronted him completely gaslighted me, completely made me feel that I'm like making things up and all this stuff. Whatever. Then I didn't have real proof. So it was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna believe you. Um, and we try to like stay together. And then I eventually found out the truth. Like, no, you were lying to me and you've been cheating on me like throughout the whole relationship on and off with different women. Like when I broke up with him and it was kind of like, all right, I'm done. Deep down, I still wanted him to chase me. I still wanted him to try.
mm,
I wanted him to fight for me, which he had
mm-hmm,
never done throughout the whole relationship. So this was my chance to be like, okay, maybe we can work things out. Because he also told me a lot of things that he had never opened up to me about. So to me, I felt like maybe this is like a change that can happen. Like this is maybe what we needed, very toxic thinking. I
yeah,
needed like better our relationship or get closer to each other.
yeah.
So I thought like, okay, this will make him chase me. So we did speak once after the breakup. I went to take him his stuff and he did like, cry and all these things. But to him, it was like, that was me trying. That was the only time I'm going to try. So now it's your fault that we're not
Wow.
together because you didn't forgive me for trying.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
luckily at that point, I was very much like stronger. I don't know if it was praying. I don't know. I legit, because I feel like if I was a lot more weak-minded, I would have fell for it and I would have been more like, no, but let's, let me chase you again. And at that time I was like, no, I'm done chasing you. Like it took a lot in me to really fight the urge to call him, to fight the urge to go visit him, to, see him. But I just told myself, like, I love him so much. Well, I thought, I love you so much, but when am I going to love myself more? And just something
Mm,
just told myself that, like, this is not healthy, and I don't want this for myself. Like, I know I deserve better. Like, I'm 20 at the time, I was 26. I'm like, I'm 26. I have my whole life ahead of me. Like, yeah, he wasted it all my early 20s, but I also learned so much. Yeah.
wow. And you mentioned like this little voice telling you like this is not the person for me. And I bet you it was like a whisper, right? Like there's probably all of the emotions, all of the things happening, all the mental, like you just mentioned, all of the other thoughts that come to your head. But I think that little voice was your intuition, right? And it sounds like that little voice comes through for a lot of people in different ways. And it's usually like a fork in the road, of go this way or that way. And for you, it was continue to accept the things that you already know you don't want and you don't deserve, or take the pain, and deal with what this breakup is going to feel like and look like, but stand up for yourself and love yourself.
Yeah, and it was hard. I mean, and I have a lot of friends that have reached out to me and tell me like, how'd you do it? You're with him for so long, and like, how did you do it? And to me, it's always just like, well, who do you love yourself? Who do you love more, like yourself or that person? And
Yeah.
it's like a detox. You're always gonna feel the worst in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
once it's like the hard part is gone, it's like it just gets better. And that's why I just looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, mix into all of this with your breakup, there was something already kind of being born at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and which is another thing that's crazy. I started my business in 2020, early 2020 or mid 2020, and I started feeling doubts towards the end of 2020. And my business hit off like out of nowhere. Like it didn't do as great as it is now, but in the beginning, it was bigger than what I thought it would be. Which like I make Michelada mix, rim paste, and stuff like that. And I eventually led into doing mobile bartending and other services and stuff. But at the time, I was just selling Michelada mix and rim paste, and I was getting a lot of requests from it. So
Mm-hmm.
then I was focusing on that more, and I think like even just little things, how he didn't like me like being on my phone, in the beginning when you're learning how to use social media, it takes you a lot more time to be adjusted to like creating flyers, creating ads, or creating, just little things.
Yeah.
He didn't like that. So to me it was always just like I saw those red flags in the beginning. And then I took a break from my business because I was getting overwhelmed, and I said, you know what, my birthday is in November. After that I'll take a break for a month or a few weeks. And I did. And during that time is when I found out he had been cheating on me. And I think it was
Mm,
because I had more like just time to like, I don't know, I just, whatever, I don't know. But during that time is when I found out. So I started 2021 at the end of that breakup. Um, and I was just lost in my life. Like my routine was different now. Like it was really hard to transition. Like I just felt like, who am I? What do I,
yeah.
like I lost a part of my identity almost, it felt like. So I was like, who am I? What's my purpose? What do I do? And one day I just decided, oh, I started getting a lot of messages about my products. And to me, I was like, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. And I didn't want to start anymore because I just felt so discouraged. I just felt so sad, depressed. Like I lost like 15 pounds. Like I was just
Mm,
so not myself. But I wrote a lot in my journal, like I mentioned. And I started going to the gym, and that helped me have a reason to wake up. And then after that, I started doing more pop-ups. And then from there, like I just made my full focus, like my business. It just literally happened from one day to another almost because I went from being just so sad and depressed to, oh, my business is like, this is going to be something like
Yeah.
bigger than what I imagined. And it's not a coincidence that my business did gradually progress since I left that relationship.
So, what is it called?
Tapias Fuego. On
Tapias.
Instagram, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, it's called Tapias Fuego Mix because that's what I started off with, just making Michelada mix.
Mm-hmm.
It gradually increased to something bigger where I also sell other products as well, but I've been focusing more on like my mobile bar services and like table setups for parties. And now I'm expanding to do like collaborations with bars and restaurants where it's like a bar takeover or like a Tapias Fuego takeover. So one of my videos blew up on Instagram, completely blew up, did not expect it. It's at 7 million views.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, 7 million and counting because it just keeps going up. But that video specifically brought me a lot of followers. So with that, the video that went viral was me making what I call cevichella. And so what it is, it's like a michelada on the bottom, and then on top it's a container of ceviche with tostito chips. I don't specialize in ceviche, which is something that I did. But
Okay.
that video, when I posted it 2 weeks later, is when it blew up. And since I don't specialize in ceviche, I didn't want to like offer it again, because I don't want that to be like my main thing.
Yeah.
Instead, I said, well, let me collaborate with somebody who does specialize in ceviche. My plan is to continue doing like takeovers at like restaurants or
Mm.
bars where it's like, okay, this day I'll be doing like a whole event where it's like my specialty recipes, my specialty drinks, and then you can also buy my products and stuff like that. So
Mm.
yeah, so I'm gonna mix that into like all the other stuff that I'm offering, like my services and my products. So should be fun.
Yeah, how exciting. Oh, I have seen you grow this business, from the very beginning, and I'm always so happy to see like whatever comes next to you. It feels like the things come to you, like there's just like one thing after the next, and so I'm excited to see also what your takeovers evolve to, like what that can turn into because you'll get to network with people too, which I think is going to be really cool, and
Yeah.
I think you're already really good at that, so I think only good things will come from that too.
Yeah, I eventually wanted to be like traveling to different cities, like because I've had people from like San Diego, from Florida, like a lot of people message me from everywhere. So I'm like, you know what? If I were to do something like it could be like a tour type of thing where it's like, okay, Tapias Fuego's touring all this year, like, catch me at this
Yeah.
place on this day. And it'll be like, just a way to interact with new people and have people from all over try my products, aside from just shipping it to them, where it's like you can try my actual drinks and my actual recipes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something I've never seen before. So I think it'll be something new, exciting, different. And what inspired me was Cardi B. How when she used to be a stripper, she used to like go to different strip clubs and like host the night. And like Cardi B taking over the strip club. So I'm like, I
Yeah.
can do that, but with drinks. So I think
Yeah.
it's gonna work.
Well,
Cardi B.
Cardi B, I know you're listening to First Gen Healing
Hey, you never know.
collab coming up.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, she is the first gen, I think, technically. So
Yeah,
who
she
knows?
is. Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. All right. Well, so people got to hear your story, and one thing I like to do is if they resonated with it, I want to leave them off with some resources or things that helped you in your journey in case they resonate with your journey and also want to explore some of those things. What is a favorite healing or mindful tool that you use? You've mentioned journaling, but is that like your go-to tool or what's one of your favorites?
When I was freshly out of the breakup, freshly trying to like get myself back together, I would go to Signal Hill at the peak and I would go there and read or just journal or just be there by myself and just sit there drinking a coffee and just being
Mm,
with fresh air, being with quiet, like no noise. Cause you don't hear, if there's no people there, especially like you just hear like wind and that's it.
yeah.
And it's so peaceful there. From journaling, aside from being alone in like quiet spaces, music helped me a lot.
That's
Jasmine,
one of my questions actually. What is one song that you go to for like a pick me up?
um, I have a few, but one song during my breakup, was this is kind of depressing, but it was Jasmine Sullivan's album, her newest album, Hotel Hose or Ho, something like that. Um, there's a song called Lost Ones, and it really I kind of cried like when I was driving to not kind of I did. I was driving to I would go hiking a lot. That's one thing too. I was
Mm.
going hiking, just being in nature, being alone in nature was helping me. Yeah, I was driving to a hike and that song came on and then I just started crying or whatever, but then again being alone really makes you just appreciate yourself more too because it's like no one helped you go through it. You helped yourself go through it.
What is a quote or advice that you've received that you or that you've read that you refer back to?
Just like in the airplane, and they ask you to put your mask on before helping others.
Yeah,
It's the same rule like that applies to life. You can't help anyone else until you help yourself.
so true.
Hmm.
All right. What is or who is an influencer that you follow and that leaves you positively inspired?
I learned to like unfollow a lot of influencers that were just like showing their like bougie lifestyle and look at me, like, don't you want to live like me?
Yeah.
I learned to unfollow those people.
Oh, I think that's great advice to go through like a
Social media
cleanse
cleanse.
on your feed.
Yeah.
I think I did that too because you're right. I think there are people out there who are just displaying like this unrealistic level of lifestyle, you know? And then those same people are sometimes people that come out and are like, "You guys have no idea what my life is like." And it's like, "Well, you're portraying like you're showing your life, you know? Like you're kind of doing it on your own too." So, yeah, I love that. I had to go through that too because, all right, well, the last set of questions are fun questions.
Okay.
So, it's salsa verde or roja?
Verde, 100%. But if I'm
Or,
trying to have like a burrito de asada, probably both. Yeah.
okay, horchata or jamaica?
Jamaica, because I'm lactose intolerant, I shouldn't be having horchata, but both too. Jamaica, probably Jamaica.
Okay, reggaeton or hip hop?
Hip hop,
Concha de vainilla or chocolate?
vainilla.
And what is your taco order, you LA girl?
Taco order.
Yes.
I usually get I usually get quesadilla de asada with
What?
both
Okay,
salsas. But if I get tacos, it's asada usually. Tres tacos de asada with everything.
con todo.
Onions, chile, everything.
Okay, perfect. And before I close out, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, for letting us into your world. I know it's not easy sometimes to talk about, you know, the things that we've gone through and reflect back, but I also think that sharing our stories really helps others, you know, who may experience the same thing. And we touched on a lot of good things, I think, you know, like repeating cycles that you thought you were going to prevent, and then you find yourself in the middle of one. And also like seeing the red flags and, you know, bypassing them just because they don't look exactly the same way. I think that will hopefully help a lot of people who are seeing those red flags and have been hiding from a truth that maybe is standing, yeah, right in front of them. So thank you so much for your time. If you'd like, just say where people can find you once more. And also, I wanted to like point out, I know this isn't within your realm. You know, you typically are posting about your Michelada mix and like the events that you're going to and are doing bar service at your dulces, which are so good too. So thank you for going outside of your comfort zone and talking about, you know, this kind of stuff as well.
Thank you. Well, my business page is Tapias Fuego Mix. You can find that on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. So yeah, that's my business page, Tapias Fuego Mix. Mhm.
Okay. And anything else you'd like to say before we close today's episode out?
Mm, just thank you for having me as well and um, making me feel comfortable to talk about everything that I did talk about. And that's another thing, just really quick, I do want to say that as I've gotten older, I know that I'm healing because I don't get emotional talking about these things anymore. And I used to. I
Mm,
used to cry just talking about whatever topic I just mentioned today.
yeah.
Um, it would make me emotional. So I think now that I'm not, it shows like a sign of healing. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Yay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Progress. I love
Yeah.
that. And even if you do get emotional, that's also
Yeah, that's okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Share it with anyone you think would like it. And remember, First Gen, I love you, I love me, and I can't wait for you to love yourself.
Yeah.
Bye.